Hello chess fans, it's day 3 and it's the final day of the rapid section at Tata Steel Chess India. What an event it is, so many fantastic games have been played, and in this video I'm also not going to disappoint you. We are going to have a look at the game between tournament leader Magnus Carlsen, who had a fantastic run on day 2, scoring 3 out of 3. He is currently on 5 out of 6. And he's playing against birthday boy Vincent Keymer, who turned 20 on this very special day. Congratulations to him. But how special it is to play chess on your birthday, and especially against Magnus Carlsen. Well, we are going to check out what happened. And well, if you do like my videos from this event, don't forget to subscribe and help the channel to grow even more. I want to reach 7,000 subscriptions by the end of this tournament, so hopefully you can help me with that. And then I'm going to show you what happened as Magnus Carlsen is playing with the white pieces, and let's check it out. He goes here for the move 1d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, and here knight c3. So many different ways of playing for both sides, and with the move c6 we do get some sort of transposition to the main lines of the semi-Slav. Magnus goes for the sharpest move, bishop g5, and Vincent Keymer, true to his style, wants to keep it as solid as possible. Played here the move knight bd7. It's a very logical developing move, and after the moves e3 and queen a5 we have the well-known Cambridge Springs variation. The queen is pretty active on a5, putting pressure against the knight on c3. There are always ideas, for instance, to go knight e4 so that you attack the knight on c3, but also the bishop on g5. Therefore, pawn takes d5 was played by Magnus. Knight recaptures, and here you see that black is threatening to win a pawn, and look what Magnus does. He goes for rook c1, so he's defending the knight on c3. Knight takes c3, pawn takes c3. And interestingly, I mean, that pawn on a2 can just be captured. I mean, it is possible, but it's extremely risky to capture such a flank pawn. I mean, if you take there, Vincent Keymer didn't do that. There is bishop d3, and white will just continue developing as quickly as possible, bringing the king into safety, grab space in the center, and well, practically speaking, I think white has fantastic chances here. So rather than taking the pawn, Keymer comes up with the move bishop a3, developing the bishop with tempo, hitting the rook. Rook goes to c2. And here, still very well-known theoretical position. In fact, Magnus Carlsen had this position 10 years ago, again in a classical game against Shahir Mamedov, who played here the main move b6 with the idea to develop the bishop from c8, maybe to b7, maybe to a6. Keymer played here the move c5 first. It's a very rare move. Of course, it does make sense to challenge the pawn on d4. White played bishop d3. Pawn takes d4. Now you cannot recapture with your c-pawn because the king is still on e1. So you have to take back with the e-pawn. And white is going to play now with hanging pawns. Are these pawns becoming vulnerable, or does it offer white's pieces extra space? That's what we will have to find out. b6 is played by Keymer. It looks like he really caught Magnus here in his preparation. It's looking like a very risky move, b6, as with bishop e4 you hit the rook. Rook has to go to b8, and well, there are a lot of possibilities. You can castle, but it looks as if bishop f4 is the principled move. And look at this, the rook on b8 doesn't have a good square to go to. However, thanks to this move, bishop b7, black stays in the game. Very important detail, as taking the rook runs into bishop takes e4. You're on exchange down, but you're going to regain the material on the next move, as both the bishop and the rook are hanging. So Magnus has to do something instead about that bishop on e4. He can take on b7, he can drop back on to d3. Queen e2 was played in the game, and black has now a very comfortable position, can consider taking on e4, but instead played here bishop a6 first. So then the bishop has to go back to d3 basically. Otherwise, if you do move your queen, the king will be stuck in the center. So bishop d3, now the bishops come off the board anyway. And of course you got to do something about it. Rook c8. But after castling kingside by both sides, it's time to make up the balance here, as it looks as if black is pretty comfortable here with an even material situation. White played here to move c4, so the pawns are moving forward, but having exchanged two sets of minor pieces really makes black's play definitely more comfortable. Bishop went back to e7. Just feels like the bishop is safer placed there, guarding some squares on the king side. White played h4. Very ambitious move. Maybe at the right moment the knight can jump to g5, threatening checkmate on h7. Rook fd8 played. And here Magnus says, well, I don't want to go for that move. In that case, after knight g5, probably knight f8 is just very solid, guarding the pawn on h7. And with the rooks on c8 and d8, feels like white has to be quite careful here how to keep his pawns defended. Instead, Magnus played rook b1. He has different ideas of activating this rook. Queen h5, the queen swings over to the other side of the board, trying to prove that the pawn on h4 is actually vulnerable. Rook b5, attacking the queen. And the queen went back to g6. Maybe queen g4, ambitious move to keep pressure against the bishop and the pawn. Who knows? But Keymer has very solid style. He really wants to exchange queens. If that happens, black is rock solid and no reasons to complain here. White has to probably push the pawn from a2 to a5 and aim for simplifications. But that's not a serious way to try to play for an advantage. Instead, Magnus is keeping queens on the board. He goes back to e2, keeping the rook on c2 defended. Black played h6, taking away the g5 square from any of white's pieces, and white played here to move a4. So anyway, probably pawn wants to come to a5. Queen g4 played anyway, attacking the bishop. G3, keeping everything pretty well defended. But now look at this. Keymer played the move a6. It's questioning the rook on b5, but the rook goes back to b2. In fact, I'm not sure. Maybe rook b1 feels even more natural. But having provoked this move, a7, a6, the pawn on b6 is more vulnerable. It's still defended by the knight, but in general you would rather keep it defended by your own pawn. Now look what's going to happen. As Keymer thinks, okay, he's in good shape, he is taking the pawn on h4. Absolutely incredible. What on earth is happening here? You cannot take with the g pawn because the king is there on g1. If you do take with a knight, and this was not played in the game, there is queen takes e2, rook takes e2, and with the move g5, black is able to regain the piece, and well, the pawn on c4 is also vulnerable. So it looks as if black is in good shape there. But Magnus comes up with a very interesting idea. Rather than capturing that bishop on h4, he played now the move a5. So he's putting pressure, threatening to take with the pawn on b6. Black is practically forced to take on a5. And all of a sudden, black is now 2 pawns up. And white pushes the pawn to c5. Now white's idea is revealed, as by sacrificing a second pawn, he has managed to create a passer himself. And the pawn is about to come forward. Bishop goes back to g5. And black is offering the exchange of bishops. White may consider taking here. But instead, the pawn goes to c6, hitting the knight on d7. Black captured on f4. G-pawn is pinned, cannot take the bishop. White captured on d7, attacking the rook on c8. Rook takes rook, rook takes back. And well, this pawn on d7, it's kind of an annoying piece. What to do? Complicated line here. It's interesting here to pause here for a moment. If you do take the pawn on d7, there's rook c8 check. King has to go to h7. After queen e4, white is going to pick up the bishop on f4 with very good winning chances, of course, with an extra piece. And white still has 3 pawns, so that looks pretty good for white. Alternatively, you have to deal with the threat of rook c8. So that is also very annoying. And well, if you put a bishop on g5, maybe you move the queen, and you cannot get rid of that pawn on d7. If you do take it, it's knight e5, and well, the queen and rook are in trouble here. And of course, there's also rook c8 as a huge threat. So in the end, Vincent Keymer decided here to sacrifice a bishop on his 20th birthday. Bishop takes g3. What a move this is. Pawn takes, queen takes g3 with check. And the king goes to f1. And black takes with the rook on d7. Look at this position, people. It is a knight and a pawn against 6 pawns. And both sides have a queen and rook. Who is better here? Well, normally speaking, you would take the side with all these extra pawns. It's really a lot. But the pawns are not dangerous at this point. And white is fighting for the initiative with the move rook c8 check. King has to go to h7, queen e4 check. If you do play something like g6, well, knight e5, it's totally unclear. The rook is not doing too well there. Black decided now to play here this move. Queen to g6, offering the exchange of queens. White captured now. You cannot take back with the king because of knight e5. It's another knight fork, and that would win the game. So black consciously recaptured with the f-pawn, but now the pawns are separated again. But keep in mind that if black succeeds in trading off that pawn on d4, white can at best get this endgame of rook and knight versus rook, which is the theoretical draw. Now the pawn is still on the board, and that gives the position totally different sort of dynamics. King e2 played. Black pushes the pawn to g5, and before black gets the chance to chase the knight away and take the pawn, the king reaches e3. Very important. Rook d6, and the knight comes in to e5. It's a beautiful outpost, and the pawns are not running that fast. a4 was played. King e4. a5 played. Rook c4. So here you're going to regain the pawn. I mean, that pawn could not have been defended at all. Rook a6, rook takes a4. It's only 4 pawns for black at this point. And I think if you just start running with the h-pawn, maybe g4, black should be sort of okay. But king g8, it feels like you're going into the wrong direction with your king. But what is white gonna do? I played here knight d3. I think very, very important and interesting move. You're not interested in winning the pawn on a5, which could have been accomplished with knight c4. But knight d3 has the idea that after king f7, you put a knight on c5, attacking the rook. If the rook goes away, went back to a8, well, then you play king e5, and you're about to win the pawn on e6. So white is super active here. I mean, in fact, the machine really didn't like rook a8. It says that you should go rook b6, and after rook takes a5, go h5. I mean, to me, this seems still totally unclear. But let's see what happens after rook a8, king e5. Black played g4, knight takes e6. And white has a passed pawn now. That's the most important thing. So rook e8 can just be met by d5. Anyway, d5 is going to be played. Also after h5, there follows d5. g3. And how is white gonna use his rook? You don't want to stand in front of the enemy's pawn for a long time. In the game, Magnus went back. Maybe rook c4 is even more ambitious, trying to go for rook c7 and give a check, pick up the pawn on g7 so that you're covering the pawn, the g3 pawn from behind. A lot of possibilities. Rook a1 was played. g2 is not a problem. You can just pick up the pawn with rook g1. Therefore, h4 was played. And well, if these pawns are coming forward, connected passed pawns are way more dangerous. d6 played, looking for chances to promote a pawn. But also there is this move g2. And if h3 is going to be played, you cannot stop h2. So knight g5 check was played. Very important move. Wherever the king goes, you can always go with your knight to h3, or at least you neutralize black's threat of pushing the h-pawn. King f8 was played, and now it's rook to g1. So you're about to wrap up this pawn on g2, and here position is still not that simple. But in time trouble, Vincent Keymer made a remarkable move. He played h3. He just gave up. his pawns very, very easily. And to be honest, I failed to understand exactly his main idea. If I were black, I would definitely have tried here this move, rook e8 check. And well, the idea is that if you go knight e6, there is king f7 and the knight is going to be lost. But you probably have to go king d5, and then with rook e2, black is able to activate a rook, keep the pawn on g2 on the board. There are a number of checks coming. It's not easy. Probably white is winning, but for some reason it was not played by Keymer. He went for h3, but there's knight takes h3. He launches the other passed pawn a4, rook takes g2, and now it is the move a3. Probably his idea is that if you block that pawn, he wanted to go king e8 followed by king d7 and attempting to wrap up the pawn on d6. But Magnus played a much better move, rook f2 check. Where's the king going? Doesn't want to go to the wrong side. You need to stop white's passed pawn at some point. Therefore, king e8 played. And now white is going to ignore that a pawn by playing the move king to e6. Wonderful shot. If you do push the pawn is out of reach, but white is simply faster with d7 check, king d8, rook f8 check, and after moving the king to c7, it's rook takes a8, and the pawn is neutralized. White's going to promote his own pawn faster. So instead of playing the move a2, rook a6 is played by Keymer, pinning the pawn on d6, so the pawn cannot be pushed. But knight g5, wonderful move, and black resigns, because if you do push the pawn to a2, there is knight h7. What a lovely move. And whatever you do, if you promote your a pawn, there is a rook f8 with checkmate. There's nothing, absolutely nothing black can do against that threat. So knight g5, what an amazing finish. And you see that first things first. I mean, Carlsen succeeded in eliminating a lot of black's pawns, but in the end, his passed pawn proved to be decisive. Very, very nice game, and that means that Magnus is moving forward to another very nice win. He's taking the lead in this event. In fact, he managed to win the event fantastically with 2 rounds before the end, with a spare round. He managed to win this event, so super impressive, and it shows that he is absolutely the best player still on the planet when it comes down to rapid chess. Well, I hope you like this video. Let me know in the comments what do you think, and well, I will definitely show you some more games. And well, actually I'm here not at home, I'm in Germany. I'm going to play a tournament myself, so probably in the next few days I'm going to upload some of my own games as well. So stay tuned for that, and well, see you soon back again. Bye bye.